Tonight, there was no more of an iconic duo than Booster Gold and being written by Dan Jurgens. Oliver Queen brings his giant wolf that was trained in dogfighting pits into a farmer's market, and somehow that's just not a big deal. And Midnighter does a team up with Grayson, because even if DC editorial doesn't know why Grayson works, boy howdy are they going to ride that train to the station. All that and more tonight on a not-so-new 52. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 209 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and oh my god, it is such a light week this week. I'm not even sure if we're going to break like an hour and a half. I tried talking about the books as best I can, but it's going to be tight. So yeah, we've only got 8 books coming out this week. Very, very light. I mean, I think this week last month was only 7, if I remember correctly, but that one, I feel like I did something else that stretched it a little longer. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But I am very happy that DC decided to put only 8 books this week because, as I mentioned last week, I am moving. Like, by the time that this episode comes out, I will be in a completely different location. This desk, these books, my sense of self-importance, all of it will be packed up and shipped like 30 miles away. So I don't know how next week's episode is going to look, but I had to get this one done in my current location, specifically because things are so up in the air. I wanted to get it done well and truly beforehand. So it's currently like 4 days before this episode comes out, which is the earliest I have ever filmed an episode. You're welcome. I'm quickly realizing as I talk more and more about this that it's basically the equivalent of somebody describing their dreams. Like, you don't care that I'm moving. Why would you? You're here for a comic show. But I guess I'm just trying to give justification for when next week I look so incredibly disheveled and completely out of breath. It's because everything sucks, and I'm just trying to make do with the move as best I can. Anyway, like I said, you're here for comics. Let's talk about the comics that are coming out this week. This week, we have, in alphabetical order, Bat-Mite, Batman Beyond, Detective Comics, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Lobo, Midnighter, and Omega Man. The only thing that I think is really big to mention out of that one is Detective Comics. That is Brian Buccellato's last issue. He has been on the run since before Convergence, and I didn't realize that until this week. I talk about that more in the review, but yeah, I looked ahead and I saw that Peter Tomasi is on the rest of the book. So be sure to check that out if you have been following that run. If not, I don't blame you. Beyond that, nothing else really to say. So, comics. Detective Comics number 44, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Fernando Blanco. So last issue, there was a whole bunch of stuff with, like, Yips was doing some shady stuff. They found her out, and as they were trying to transport over to Yips, I believe there was an issue of, or no, sorry, when there was a different transport going on, we had a giant robot show up and break a bridge to stop the transport. And I think that's pretty much where we left off. Here's the thing, though. Turns out, I didn't know this last issue, that this issue is Brian Buccellato's final. Like, this is the wrap-up to the arc. And opinions on that at the end, but regardless, we pick up with Bullock and Montoya. They are driving down and trying to get a hold of Yips. Nothing's working out, and Bullock's like, come on, I don't care what you did. I just want to help you out of this. Like, you were my partner and so much more than that. Just come on. And Montoya's like, are you serious? Like, you know what she did, right? And he's like, shut up. Just leave it alone. So we cut over to Yips, and she is in the car with a Falcone member. It's not the main Falcone. They say his other name later, but he's the one who's been around for a while. And basically he's like, okay, so, like, what do you want to do here? How's this going to go? And he hands over a huge envelope of cash and says, like, look, I'm doing what I'm doing. This is how it's going to be. And he basically tells her, like, so you just flip just like that? Like, it's not even a thing? And she's like, look, you already control most of the department. I'm just going to be able to get ahead of it enough to get some money here before it becomes inevitable. So I'm getting out now. And we see that she expects to be killed. And he's like, no, I'm not going to kill you. Like, I need you to be an example of people that willingly come to me, get a reward out of it, because that's so much easier for me than trying to strong arm people. So yeah, get out of here. So at that point, as soon as they drive away, she calls up Harvey and says, hey, I need you to pick me up. So we then see Gordon, Batman, is fighting against the giant robot, which apparently is Joker themed. It has a big smile and it's purple and green, but it's like the shape of a gorilla. I wouldn't say it's really Joker themed, but regardless, the driver seems to agree, like, oh, you didn't think you could have a Batman without a Joker, did you? I'm your Joker this time around. And so Gordon just jumps up and starts wailing on it, throwing around things. Robot grabs hold of Gordon, throws him like halfway across the city, straight into a building, and the robot's just like, well, that was a good meeting, but I'm late for a jailbreak, so ta-ta. And so we see that Bullock and Montoya and Yip are all driving down the road, and they just so happen to go near the giant robot, and the robot's like, well, apparently these guys didn't get the memo, and so it breaks the bridge again, a different bridge that they were driving down, which causes the car to flip over, and it looks like it's about to like crash a good 50 feet down off the bridge, but then Gordon comes in, catches the car, not like completely saving them, but at least not killing them. So the car is now upside down, and Gordon's like, hey, is everyone all right? Is everyone good? And he looks over at Yip, and she's groggy. She's mostly unconscious. And she's like, you got to go to the circus. You got to stop them. And he's like, hey, look, it's tomorrow night. You don't got to worry about it. Tonight's just the rehearsal with like the cops being there. And she's like, yeah, that's the target. You got to go. And so Bullock gets Montoya out of the car, but says we have to leave her behind. She's stuck. I can't get her out. And then all of a sudden, Bullock pulls out a lighter, sets it down on the trail of oil that has come back from the car, and sets it off. Just full on explodes the car. And Montoya's like, what did you do, man? And he's like, not another word. We're not going back after this. So we cut over to the circus, and we see whatever backstage director's like, where are my silk performers? I need my silk performers. And we see behind a curtain, getting dressed up, are the, I forget what their names are already, the Dia de los Muertos brothers, the guy who dressed up as skeletons. They're making themselves out to be the silk performers, so the guy's saying like, all right, get out there now. And we see them setting up a whole performance while the cops are all watching in the audience. And underneath one of the platforms is a sniper rifle. So Bullock and Montoya are just speeding through traffic, trying to get to the circus as fast as possible. Harvey explains what he believes the plan is. He's like, look, the seating chart that Yip sent was not for where the VIPs were going to sit tomorrow. It's for where the cops are tonight. I don't know which cops they're targeting, but they're clearly just targeting the cops. And Montoya's like, oh, you got that from your partner, huh? Why should we trust her? And he's like, they were her last words. And she's like, only because you made them. They're like, what? So at that point, Gordon goes back fighting the robot. He catches up to it, and it's just like, I don't know what I can do to this thing. It's big, and it's like too big for me to just tackle down. What are we doing here? And the robot continues to swat Gordon out of the sky every time it comes by. And Daryl on the other end is like, wait a minute, I've got something. It's got a power core that's not properly insulated, which means it could overheat. And Gordon's like, okay, so what, you want me to go in there and like turn up the heat? And he's like, nah, you can't get past the armor. It's too much. But if we can use microwaves, we can heat it up from the outside. So Daryl turns on whatever setting on Batman's suit. He's able to emit microwaves from the palm of his hand. And then all of a sudden the suit locks up, and we see that inside is Joker's daughter, who comes out, and she does like a flip as the suit explodes, and she's like, no fair, that wasn't part of the deal here. And Gordon's like, who the hell are you? I've never met you before. Who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm the ruler of the Gotham Underground. I'm Joker's daughter. And he's like, are you kidding me? No, you're not. You're just some stupid kid. Like, what? You think I'm just gonna pack up and leave just because you say, oh, I'm the Joker's daughter? I'm scared? And he just backhands her and just being like, all right, look, you're not the Joker, you're not his legacy, you're not even cut out for Gotham, you are pathetic, and like, I'm just gonna send you to Arkham, whatever. So we cut back over to the circus where Bullock's pulled up. We see that we're just a few seconds away from everything going to hell. Someone's loaded up with a sniper rifle, and they're lining it up at Alvarez and his partner that I always forget the name of. And we see, I guess, Batman has been alerted to this, and he comes in and he jets down into the tent and manages to spook the sniper enough that he doesn't take the shot. Gordon orders all the other cops to get out, so they start sprinting. And when he switches to thermal vision, he's able to see up in the rafters are the De Los Muertos guys who are able to get knocked out, no problems, no fatalities. So we then get the full walkthrough that apparently Stefano Falcone was his name, is buying out the cops, as Yip said, was trying to get all of them corrupted over to his side, but there were a few people who couldn't be bought out. They had principles and morals. Alvarez and his partner were one of them, and so those people were just going to be killed in order to take out all the remaining problems there. So that's where that was going to be. So Falcone's been arrested. We see that the assassins are now in prison. We see Joker's daughter is in Arkham, and they mentioned something that she kidnapped a Powers Corporation scientist to make the suit, and that's the whole reason they had it. But regardless, we see that Jim's talking to Bullock outside of his balcony on his apartment, just being like, and what about you, Bullock? You good after the death of your partner? And we immediately see she's alive. They faked her death. It was all part of a big plan there in order to get her out of whatever consequences she would have from bowing to Falcone like that. And she's just like, hey, look, I want you to know, Bullock, we weren't just partners. I did love you. And Bullock's just sitting there with a beer in hand like, well, that makes one of us. So she takes off. Bullock's left alone again, but he's talking to Jim, and Jim's just like, all right, well, you know, how things are going with your other partners. Like, oh, you mean the one that went behind my back and warned that I was going to fake Yip's death. And so obviously this is Montoya, and we see that they come to a steady truce where Montoya basically says, look, you were a great person to train under. I loved being there. However, you were not someone that I could work like with. I had to leave. I had to get out of there and do things my own way. And Bullock's like, okay, well, you left me out in the cold. And he's like, no, I had to fly solo for a while, figure out my own stuff, but now I'm here, now I'm back, and we can work together. So we get one last page of Gordon and Bullock. They're just having some beers up on the balcony, and he's like, well, you know, we've both been through a bit of a learning curve here. We've made it out on the other side. And Bullock says, by the way, just lose the mohawk. You look like a hipster. So, yeah, that's the issue. Next up, I believe, is Peter Tomasi's run. We'll have like one interruption to that, but we'll have a good run up until, I believe it's up until Tynion's run in Rebirth. So, yeah. I never got into this run. I never did. I wish I did, because looking back on it, there are some cool moments. It's not like it was completely devoid. I'm talking about even before the Gordon Batman stuff, even back before then. Like, it's always had these cool ideas, but it's always been a problem where I felt like it was not allowing me or not providing enough attempts for me to relate to the characters and get to know them. It just kind of was so focused on telling this large, sprawling story that it didn't give me that chance to really narrow in on, okay, but why do I care about this group of assassins? Well, Yip's a perfect example. She clearly was this big thing to Bullock here, but if I really look at her over the course of the story here, she had one thing in a previous arc where she got shot, and then everything else after that just, I don't feel like it followed naturally. It feels like it just happened because the story, the sprawling story, needed it to happen that way. So I would have liked a little bit more of the personal and not so much of the big bombastic, but what are you going to do at this point? So this particular issue, I'll say is a 7. It's almost a 7.5, but it's not just there. But it's for the run as a whole, it probably would crack up to the 7.5. But it just never quite grabbed me enough to get me to an 8. Like, at any point, it's always just boiled underneath that. So, yeah, it's disappointing, but you get what you get. Green Lantern number 44, written by Robert Venditti, art by Billy Tan and Martin Coccolo. So last issue, we had a run-in with Relic, but the big thing that happened was Virgo put on the gauntlet and was immediately overwhelmed with green energy to the point where he's probably dead, more things or not. So we open up this issue with them saying Virgo's not dead. He's in critical condition. They need to get to a doctor immediately. Green Lantern has some ideas to where to go to that. However, first he's going to Suicide Squad Trapper. He's putting a bracelet on him made of whatever technology, saying, look, this thing is loaded with a massive paralytic agent that can literally stop your heart if I didn't get my dosage right. And like, I estimate that you're like 185 pounds. That seems accurate to me, but if I'm off by a little bit, you might die. And it will activate anytime that you do anything. You mess with my corresponding bracelet, you're dead. You mess with your bracelet, you're dead. You try to kill me or like something happens to me, you're dead. All of that stuff, you're dead. And so Trapper looks at it and he's like, what's a pound? Yeah, I'm not familiar. I don't know if I'm 185 of the thing you're talking about. So Lantern goes back into the back of the ship where Virgo's being held, and he's talking to Darlene, just like, hey, look, I know a place that's safe that can get you all fixed up, and I've got a lot on my plate, but I'm going to take care of you because I'm not going to let you die in front of me. And Darlene's just like, okay, if you're so confident about all this happening, why are you going into the weapons hold? And he starts pulling out a bunch of guns, and he's just like, just in case. I want to be prepared here. So they hop off the ship. They reach this planet called Gallon, and it's a port there for a bunch of different ships. And we see that the ships are, filling up all the parking space or whatnot, but the town seems completely empty. There is nobody there except for a young girl, and Hal goes up and says, like, hey, do you know what's going on? And she's just like, oh, God, we have guests. And she immediately sprints off inside. So Trapper's like, all right, well, I'm guessing that's about your reputation as a Green Lantern. And he's like, nah, this doesn't make any sense. When I last showed up here, this place, like, was a normal port. There were people working and living, and it was a whole thing. But now it's like a ghost town. So whatever. We just got to find the doctor. Let's figure it out. So we cut to underneath the city where there's this weird guy hooked up to a bunch of wires and computers and whatnot, and he says, all right, wakey wakey, we have guests, let's show them a good time. So we go in and we see that there is a doctor there who's got a nurse or maybe a wife or something like that, and he's like, don't worry, the guests won't find us. They probably just want some gas and then they'll leave. And then there's a knock on the door, and Hal's like, hi, I have a friend, he needs medical attention. Slam. Okay, all right, well, let's try that again. And he busts in the door and says, hey, I went a long way to bring this man here for some medical attention. You're going to look at him, got it? And doctor's like, okay, what's wrong with him? And the wife's just like, no, don't help them. They're guests. How dare you? So the wife goes off to hide a little bit, but the doctor's like, okay, but like, seriously, what happened? And be very quick about it. And he's like, this is what happened. He shows the gauntlet, and it's like, oh, that seems like, Green Lantern stuff. And he's like, it is, but like, it's much more potent, and it is easily able to be overused if you don't have the willpower to control it. This guy put it on and he didn't have the willpower. So what's going on? And so they pull out a little brain scan thing and say, oh yeah, he's got severe trauma up in there. Like, his brain shut down because it's just focusing on healing. That is the only thing it can do right now. I can speed up the process, but that's about all I can do here. And Hal's like, all right, fair enough, thanks. By the way, what's up with this town, bro? Why is everything weird? And then, of course, as they're talking, we see that a bunch of pods has opened up, and flying out of it are people with very hawk-like wings. It's Thanagarians, and they have come into this town, and we see as Hal is preparing to help out with them, they come in and they're like, oh, let's come and get our guests. And this is Olio's wake. Olio being one of the Thanagarians. There's like 5 other there that all get names. This has to be Robert Venditti trying to, like, just in case we eventually get the movie or something like that, because he's got Olio, Jumble, Medley, Podge, Pastiche, Mismash, and Smorgas. So all of them are Thanagarians. They all come in, and Hal's like, what the hell are these things? And the doctor's freaking out, the wife's freaking out, and he's just like, no, seriously, what are they? I can help you out, but you gotta tell me what this is. And he's like, that's Olio's Wake. They're marauders. They moved in a few months ago, and anytime that a ship comes into port, they raid it, and like all the ships that are in those parking lots out there, they're just empty husks. There's nothing to them. And so Olio's trying to sniff out the guests, and he's just like, oh, what, you set us up? You doing that? And he's just like, no, they force us to keep running the port as bait. They took out our communications. We can't even call for help. So at that point, he's like, look, if you mentioned our lantern earlier on before during an earlier conversation, he always swung by with his partner to make sure this part of space was safe, but we haven't seen him for a while. And he's like, yeah, it's a thing. Don't worry about it. But like, I will help you out. So we see him hand a gun over to Trapper, and Trapper's like, oh, this might be a mistake on your part, but thank you very much for this. And he points out the bracelet again, and he's like, seriously, don't even think about it. So as one of the Olio's Wake finds them, has like thermal imaging through a door, Hal summons a freight train and just rams this guy down. And he's like, yeah, you found me. So big fight scene kicks off. It's basically just one by one, we see each of the Thanagarians, what they do, what their power set is. We see that one of them has a sonic blast that he's able to use as just part of his biology. And he ends up hitting Hal, ends up knocking him out. Trapper's then like, all right, fine, I guess I gotta step in now. So as they're about to murder Hal, he steps in, starts shooting with his guns. Hal gets up and he's like, all right, I'm a bit shaky, but let's try this out. And he summons a giant dragon creature to start attacking the rest of the Thanagarians. But Trapper starts shooting to kill. He starts doing actual lethal shots. And Hal's like, hey, no, not okay. You only shoot to like wound and take them out. We do not kill. And he's just like, that, I thought we were killing. Sorry. So he ends up taking a few more shots. He gets rid of some of their wings, and he's like, all right, fine, I can go for style points. Why not? One of them is about to crash into Trapper, and Hal protects him, and doing so, he's like, all right, fair enough, but you're not looking so hot. And Hal's down on his knees like, fine, and he just passes out again with blood coming out of his ears. So some time passes. We see Virgo is now up, and he's like, Hal, you might have died trying to save me. That's so noble of you, whatever. And he's like, what happened? There's something with the glove. And the doctor's like, no, it was that sonic blast you took. Like, it's incredible you got up after the first time you went down. But yeah, no, you're fine now. I fixed up whatever else, but it was all just about that. So basically, he's like, look, I'm happy to help. I'm doing whatever. What happened to the rest of the people that, we didn't kill there? And they're like, we've got them locked down. If the Green Lanterns aren't going to be able to police us, we can police ourselves. We just needed someone to come in with some firepower to take them out in the first place. And we basically see them get all packed up and move outside the door. And Hal's like, hey, Trapper, you stepped up. Good job. You didn't try to do anything bad. And he's like, yeah, because you got a bracelet that's going to kill me. And he's like, yes, and I will continue to have that bracelet that might kill you. So the young girl from the beginning runs up, gives Hal a hug for helping out the town. We see people are now walking around. And he's like, well, make sure both of you get rested because we got a long ways ahead of us here. And that's the issue. It's basically just a one-shot just to wrap up the whole Virgo maybe dead thing, but it's not bad. It's honestly an enjoyable enough issue. I think it gives a good characterization to Trapper here of, we already had this idea that maybe not Heart of Gold, but he's at the very least able to recognize that he's going to get more out of doing good than doing bad in this situation. So he's just running with it. And I think it works to show that he does have maybe not noble intentions, but he can recognize that doing a good thing feels good. So good on that. The rest of the issue is mostly just a fight scene. The Thanagarians feel a bit weak as a villain, but if you're going to do them, you're going to do them. I'm going to say this is I'll say 7.5. I think it's up there. I enjoyed it enough. It's not great by any means, but it's a solid issue. Green Arrow number 44, written by Benjamin Percy, art by Patrick Zircher. So last issue was kind of just the wrap up of whatever story arc was going on there. But the big thing that came out of it was Ollie now has a half wolf, half dog thing named George, and this issue is almost exclusively focused on George. So we pick up at a farmer's market where he's able to walk this wolf thing through just a bunch of normal people, but he's on a date with a girl named Kyra. And he's like, it always goes the same way. I get into a relationship with someone, I get to know someone, and then they say the words, I feel like I don't even know you. And what am I supposed to do about that? And we see throughout this issue, there's somebody watching Oliver on rooftops and following him around. So they go into a fish market, and George sees some fish being thrown across the docks, and he immediately just leaps up and grabs one. And his guy's just like, that's $100 of Chinook right there. So Oliver hands out a hundo and just like, all right, keep the change, whatever. And they're like, is that thing a wolf? And he's like, I don't know. I know nothing about this dog. Meanwhile, Kyra continues pushing, just like, seriously though, like, are you listening to me? I don't know anything about you. Like, I tell me what you're hiding. And he's like, I'm just Oliver Queen. What are you talking about? And so they go down into an underground portion of this farmer's market where there is a fortune teller who I believe is the woman from the first arc. I forget what name they gave her, but they don't call her the same here. But as they come in, she's like, oh, I dreamed about you last night. And he's like, what? Really? Does he say that to everyone who walks in here? He's like, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking about your dog. And so she plucks some of George's hair, throws it into a bowl, puts her own blood in there, to which Oliver's like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, no, we are now one. And she starts going through this cosmic memory thing where she's like, oh, I can see the history of the bloodline of this dog and all that. And the rest of the issue is just, how did George get to be George? So we open up in the Arctic. There is a very snowy town, and it's hardened by a bunch of ice and whatever else. And then for 10 days there was wind that made it so like it was completely unable for anyone to go outside. However, a bunch of wolves rolled in. Like a plague of wolves came into town, and they started tearing apart the horses. They broke into people's windows and just started killing them as well. It was absolute chaos. And when the people tried to fight back, they, succeeded to some extent, but it was more wolves showing up, because the more that the wolves fed, the more there was blood in the air and there was flesh and whatnot. So it just kept on bringing in more and more and more wolves. And they tried a few different things, like making scarecrows, but like out of trees. So like they carved scary faces into the trees. Didn't work. They tried human sacrifice of like, our weak and elderly will go out and that will satiate the wolves. Nope. Everything was bad. So eventually there was a guy named the Old One, who was an Athabascan Indian trapper, and he came up and he understands the language of the wolves. He knows what was up. But when he came into the town, it was too late. Town was completely killed. Everyone was dead. However, it was not too late to punish the wolves. So he started going around and he started killing them one by one. And he was doing a pretty good job, but eventually he ran out of bullets as well. So he pulls out this axe that he has made. And the axe has a blade that is made out of the jawbone of a demon who was preserved in a glacier, or at least that's the story. And he's like, yes, it has dark powers and whatnot, and so he uses it, and he starts killing all the wolves until eventually he's stuck in a 24-hour-long battle with the alpha wolf. And eventually he gets the upper hand by cutting off the wolf's paw, and that's that. He succeeded. But he doesn't kill the alpha wolf. The person says, oh, who knows why he did it? Maybe he was lonely. Who cares? But he brings the alpha wolf back to his cabin, where it's essentially sated at this point. It's not trying to actively kill him because it's, of course, lost a paw. But using some sort of black magic and spices and whatnot, he takes the wolf's paw and reattaches it to the wolf. And it's like new. Nothing was a problem there. So at that point, the wolf was not tamed, but it did respect the Old One, so they worked as a team at this point. And that happened for a long time until eventually a group came and attacked them. And they attacked that in the Old One's cabin, and they were called the Bone Hunters. And it turns out, according to the Old Woman, that bones are not meant to be buried. They have energy in them, and they are meant to be used. And like, again, the axe is what we were talking about. So as the bone hunters come in, he goes for the axe, but he ends up getting his hand impaled, and he is sorry, not him, not the old one, but the dog, the wolf, is killed by one of the bone hunters. And the old one's like, oh, he's bleeding out, he's super angry, he comes at them, but he also is too weak, and he is killed. And the axe with the demon's jawbone falls into the hands of the bone hunters. So we then see that apparently before all of that, before anything happened, there was a sled dog team that was led by a Siberian Husky, and George got freaky. He went ahead and he had a puppy who apparently he had a litter, but out of the 8 in the litter, only one survived, and that one was George. And George was bought up by a man who then put it into dogfighting rings and stuff like that. It was bought out. Cue the events of the last arc, and there you go. George is now in the hands of Oliver. All that happened, and she doesn't think it's an accident. And Kyra's just listening to all this like, that doesn't answer any of my questions about Oliver. What's happening here? And the woman says, like, look, a fight is coming, but he was raised for a fight. The bone hunters are coming. I can hear them rattling. It's you got to be ready. And so Kyra is like, Ollie, what was that all about? What's happening? And Oliver's like, yeah, I'm gonna go. I'll call you. And Kyra's like, I just don't understand you. I don't think it's gonna work out here. So we see that Oliver and George are walking home in the rain. George notices something, and the bone hunters attack. They were here. They're right here. Why? Who knows? But they put a trank dart into George, and more keep coming out to attack Oliver. He doesn't have his gear on him, at least not apparently at this point, so there's not a lot he can do. But as he's about to be attacked from behind, all of a sudden, it gets caught in what appears to be a very sticky, webby net. And Oliver looks up, and it's Spider-Man. No, it's not. Could you imagine, though? It's actually, her name is Catalina Flores, but her code name, and she was the one who was watching Oliver on rooftops the whole time, is Tarantula. And she says she's here to save Oliver's ass. And so they join the fight together. Oliver's like, what do they want with my dog? And she's like, they don't want your dog. They want its bones. So who would have thought the bone hunters were after bones? Tarantula seems really familiar. Like, really, really familiar. It might be that she was introduced here and then I read her in a later comic, but I feel like it was somewhere else in New 52, but I cannot remember it for the life of me. So, honestly, it's not the worst setup to, like, an arc. It's fine, but it does feel so standalone and so completely its own thing. It's basically just an origin story for George. It's basically saying, like, look, there was this magic stuff that was involved, and then he was the only one who survived out of his litter. That's fine. We want an origin story for the wolf. If the wolf's going to be playing a big part, I'm okay with that, but it does feel very skippable inherently because of that. It doesn't feel like it is necessary to the plot, but it looks good. I don't have a problem with the writing. It's overall an enjoyable issue. I just think that if we're looking at this from like an art-to-art perspective, if you have to skip one, go ahead and do this one. So I'm going to say this is I'll say 7.5. It's almost to the 8. I think the only thing I'm missing is that they kind of just throw it onto Oliver and say, oh yeah, and you meeting him was like not fate, or it was fate. It had to happen. It wasn't coincidence. Like, I would have liked the origin story to maybe tie in just a little bit more with stuff that's related, or we get maybe into it more later, but it just feels like, oh yeah, George had this crazy awesome backstory, and then also he met you. Like, it is just tacked onto the end there. But that's a very minor critique, all things considered. 7.5 is still very respectable. Midnighter number 4, written by Steve Orlando, art by Stephen Mooney. So last issue we had a name given to Midnighter on who stole all this tech, a Russian named Akakievich. And the end of the issue was Midnighter coming up to Grayson in the middle of a mission in his own book, basically saying, hey, gotcha. So we cut over to Moscow, and we see a group of drunken men, all dressed in business casual, in the back of a cab, and one of them's like, hey, look, I promise you this will be the greatest night of your life. It's literally the coolest thing. We're all going to be heroes tonight. And we see them enter into this completely busted down, like, slums of an area, and he goes into this building, and there's a woman on a typewriter just sitting out in the hall. And he's like, all right, trust me. And he gives a password, Velja Knock. And she presses a button on the side, and the wall opens up, and inside it's all sleek and white and bright. And a man is standing there in a coat saying, welcome to the inn of Guire Grando. Cash only. So they're led into a room, and they say, men, summon your courage. You're going to need it. And they start going like, oh my God, it's a monster. It's horrible. It's gross. And we cut over, and we show that there is this emaciated, mostly naked guy who has gray skin and fangs, and he's bolted up to the wall. He's handcuffed, and he's just like, please, I've been here for weeks. I've been sleeping in my own. And then the guys, they go over to a wall panel, they pull out some wooden stakes, and they say, it's a vampire, it's right there, we gotta do it, we're gonna be heroes, we're killing a monster. And so they stake this man through the heart, and they start high-fiving each other, saying like, we did it, we just killed a we're vampire hunters, man, hell yeah. So we cut over to a different place in Moscow where Midnighter and Grayson are just sitting in a restaurant enjoying a meal, and Grayson's kind of a little bit shocked of like, I'm not sure about this stuff, but he questions Midnighter of like, okay, so you abducted me for what, coffee? What is this about? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed you like taking orders from men dressed in black leather. And he does a little bat ears. And we see there's another man with them who's named Asset 184. He's got a long Russian name that I can't possibly pronounce. And he basically says, look, there's basically a thrill kill club somewhere in the area. I don't know where, but it is run by Akakovich, and a bunch of people are attending it, and we basically it's just an issue because these monsters that they're killing are not really all that monstrous, and we get more on that later on. So we cut to a sauna, where the guys are inside, and they're like, yeah, oh my God, that was awesome. Did you remember, like, I swear to God, when that vampire was like lunging at us and we staked it, so cool. And Grayson and Midnighter walk in, and they're like, hey guys, we heard that you guys visited Guire Grando. We would like to tell us where it is. And they're like, yeah, well, what are we going to do? Like, we killed a monster. You can't do anything to us. And immediately Midnighter and Grayson just start going to town. Midnighter more so. He's attacking them as they are actively trying to kill him. They pull out like a knife. One of them breaks a bottle of wine and uses it to try to slash. And we see Grayson does manage to save him by taking the bottle of champagne and using it to kick the knife out of the guy's hand. And Midnighter's like, I knew you were there. And he's like, so why didn't you stop him? He's like, because I just like hearing you say my name. Because he yelled out Midnighter beforehand, if that wasn't clear. So when there's only one guy left, he's holding his face right up to like the sauna rocks and saying, now, you're going to tell us where the place is, where this Thrill Kill Club is, or else I'm going to take these sauna rocks and see how many can fit up inside your body, one by one. And he's like, oh, it's in a town called Kapotnyak. Please don't hurt me. And Grayson's like, don't you already know how many sauna rocks fit in a person? He's like, yeah, but it's about the journey. So we cut to a homeless man. He's out on the street. He's freezing, like he's about to die. And the man in a big coat from the kill club before comes in and says like, oh, I can show you somewhere safe to go. Please come with me. And they walk into the sleek place, and he's like, oh, I don't know if I can stay here. I don't have any money. And he's like, oh, you don't need any money. You have your own intrinsic value. And he takes off his coat, and it turns out he is also a vampire, and he turns this guy. So we cut to sometime later. Grayson and Midnighter are watching over the place. They followed the guys there because they were stupid enough to take a limousine this time. And so we see them walking into the place. They go into the back room, and we see that there is another vampire there. And it seems to be the homeless man. It seems to be that same guy from before. And they're like, oh my God, it's disgusting. It's horrible. Quick, before it attacks us, we got to stab it. And he's like, please, I have a life. I'm not a vampire. You don't have to do this. So Grayson and Midnighter walk in. They see the old woman sitting outside, and Grayson's trying to like schmooze his way in. He's just like, "We're so sorry to interrupt you, but the men that walked in," and then Midnighter comes up and he's like, "Look, we're not going to insult your intelligence. This town used to be something great. You have been living here since the old times. Then this guy came in and made it all shit, right? We want to go in and just talk to that guy. Maybe get your town back for you." And she's just like, "All right." And she presses the button. So Midnighter and Grayson bust in. We do see there are guards and stuff to this place. So the men who are about to stake the vampire in the back room, they hear the alarms and the screaming and whatnot going off. They end up bolting, or at least trying to bolt. But as they try to make their way out the front door, they are immediately met with all the guards being fought by Grayson and Midnighter, and they're kind of held back. They're unable to move. So once the guards are taken care of, Midnighter is surrounded by a ghostly presence. I don't even know if Grayson's able to see it, but it is the main vampire guy. And he grabs hold of Midnighter and just brings him up through the roof. And Grayson's like, "Oh, yeah, of course he would leave." So up in the upper area, once the vampire releases him, Midnighter throws some throwing knives into the vampire's hands, and he's like, "Very fascinating. I can see that you smile and your juices are pumping. You want to hurt me. Maybe we're not so different." He introduces himself. He says, "I am Upir, the primal death, and can you truly comprehend what kind of evil I am?" And Midnighter's like, "No, you're not. Your name's Polidoran. Like, I heard it. Some other guy, when I was stuffing his face with my fist, I heard him call out for your name. You're a mediocre actor and you got some cellular enhancements. You're not even a real vampire. But the thing is, even if you're not a real vampire, you can still die like one." And he jumps up and knees this guy in the head so hard that it explodes. And it explodes out into a bunch of cockroaches and rats. And Midnighter has just the biggest grin on his face. He's like, old school. I like it. Cool. I like the tradition. And so he just starts squashing the rats and cockroaches one by one. There's still a few running around, but we hear Polidoran's voice come out saying like, "You enjoy killing just as much as the people who come in here. Who are you to judge them?" And he's like, "Look, your slaughterhouse has nothing to do with me. But you people never understand what I am. You're all cobras, and I'm a mongoose that's coming in to wreck shop." So Grayson busts in the door. He's got his gun drawn. He's saying, "Right behind you." Midnighter realizes whatever is happening, and he swipes around real quick and cuts off the top of the vampire's skull. And that's that. And Grayson's like, "What did you do, man?" And he's like, "What? I was out of steaks." So we see that Grayson goes around. He frees the other vampires that are in the area. Midnighter gets on a call with Marina, who basically is like, "Hey, are you on a mission with somebody else? What's going on there?" And he's just like, "Don't worry about it. It's not a big thing." We see that Midnighter is like going to kill these vampires because obviously, they're not exactly leading a blessed life now. It might not be something that they want to live with. But Grayson's like, "No, stop. That's not how we do things." So we see them get to some sort of lab. They do some investigation on the main vampire. Turns out that he was a dude who was treated with reprogrammed Martian cells that mimic vampirism, but ultimately are just extra cells. So Grayson thinks, "Oh, well, we can treat these guys, these other ones who have turned, with gene therapy. Like, we can just unprogram the cells." However, they were apparently also booby-trapped. So the moment they start doing work on them, they all just disintegrate into piles of dust. And yeah, that's that. So we cut over to a bar afterwards, and Grayson's sitting talking with Midnighter. Midnighter gives the name of Akakovich, and he's like, "Yeah, he's the guy. He stole some of my tech. I'm trying to track him down, see what's up." And Grayson, him down some shots, and Grayson's like, "Look, if he's out there, he's holding your origin file, he's doing whatever. I pinged his nanosignature from the Martian cells just before they disintegrated, so I know where they were made." And Midnighter's like, "I may have kidnapped you to join onto this team, but I am so happy you are on board with all of this." So we cut over to somewhere else in Russia where there's some military guys who are meeting with Akakovich, and they, I guess, were watching this via video feed, and then the general people are just like, "This was a failure. This didn't work at all. Why should we sink more money into you, Akakovich?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? This was amazing success, because who cares about vampires? Like, that's nothing. Don't you want the man who's got a computer for a brain? Imagine having soldiers being able to see every move in a fight before it makes it. You want me to sell that to you. And he zooms the camera in on Midnighter as he says, coming soon. So, yeah, seems like Akakovich is just going after Midnighter. Midnighter's going after him. I probably got like 3 or 4 more issues before they actually find him, but regardless, I'm down for it. As for the Grayson crossover, I mean, I don't feel like they used Grayson to his fullest extent. There's the idea that he's saying like a no-kill rule, but I don't know. I don't feel like Midnighter could have easily have done that on his own. Like the fact that he did kill some of the other people that were out there that were guards and whatnot. He killed like the vampire guy, but didn't kill the victims. I don't feel like Midnighter normally would kill the victims. It feels like he went the extra mile here, specifically because Grayson was there to be able to tell him to back off. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me putting the fact that I expect Midnighter to have these very mild moments of humanity between issues. So I'm going to say this is just a flat 7 for me. It's a good one-shot, but it does feel like it's for the sake of Grayson selling really well, and Midnighter was in that book, so let's return the favor. Let's get Grayson over another one and see if it helps. I mean, he's smack dab on the cover, so it doesn't feel like it was an issue that really needed to happen for the sake of the story, but it was something a lot more for why not. So yeah, 7. Batman Beyond number 4, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Bernard Chang. So last issue we had Terry and Barbara Gordon, not Terry, I'm going to keep saying Terry, Tim and Barbara Gordon breaking out of whatever camp Brother Eye had them put into, and when they got out, they discovered that the Alfred AI was corrupted, and now Gotham's under attack because Brother Eye's found them. We open pretty much just with that. We also have the new hero, who we don't get a name for secret identity-wise, but his character name is Micron, and it seems that he does just have the same abilities as the Atom. And they're all on a rooftop looking up as a huge amount of drones just descend from the sky, crashing into Gotham, causing widespread carnage and damage. So Tim talks to Micron, just like, yeah, it was the Alfred AI, it was me, it's my fault all of this happened. And Micron's like, you don't sound like Terry, who are you? He's like, I'm Tim. And Barbara steps in and vouches, saying like, he's Batman, that's all you need to know. So at that point, Micron jumps into the fight, he grows big, and he just starts swatting these drones out of the sky. We see that the city seems to be littered. I won't say full of, but there's quite a few Joker's gang members who are really, really up for this. Like, they're like, finally, it's happening. Gotham is burning. We welcome our robot overlords. So they're just kind of scattered throughout the issue of constantly being there. Once again, Tim is just like, oh, Barbara, I underestimated Brother Eye again. I keep on messing this up. And she's like, look, we don't have time for that. Like, you are doing your best. Gotham needs a Batman. You got to step up. So he jumps in, and Barbara's like, I've called in every police officer because I'm still technically commissioner, even though I was gone in a camp for a while. But I called in every officer. They're all going to help out, but you got to get in there. So we cut up to the moon base, which is where Ink's daughter, Deanna, is watching all this unfold. And Deanna's like, oh my God, you're finally taking Gotham. What happens to me after that? What are you going to do? And Brother Eye's like, I'm going to force you to join. Like, I'm going to, whatever the word is that he used, like, bring you into the entire thing. You will be processed. There you go. So we see a woman and her baby are about to be, quote unquote, processed. And the Joker goons are just standing off to the side like, no, not her. Put us in first. She doesn't even want this. And then Tim comes in and just destroys the robot. And he's like, all right, woman, you good? I'm going to do whatever I can to save you and your kid. And so he drops them off. And then Alfred starts responding, just like little staticky noises, as Tim's being fired upon with like rapid accuracy. And he's like, look, they shouldn't be able to lock onto my suit so well because I've got stealth stuff. Alfred, they've corrupted you. I think that they're able to target onto you. And Alfred statics through like, yeah, that seems fair. So he asks Alfred where the central AI processing unit is, and it's apparently on the shoulder. The suit like recoils a bit just to show it. Tim rips it out and says, look, I'm sorry. You've been a big help, but like, I have to do this. And he doesn't crush it. I feel like it's gone. I feel like it not being connected to the suit means that it's gone. But they don't specifically show it being destroyed, so maybe it's still there. Regardless, a big robot grabs him. Micron comes in, just smacks the giant robot down, and Batman's just like, hey, you're clearly like Justice League level caliber here. I thought the Justice League was all taken. What's your story? And he's like, oh, funny story. And then he immediately gets hit in the back by a bunch of like drone missiles. So we see a bunch of Joker goons are calling out for the end of the world still. Barbara knocks him out and calls out to her cops like, oh, the precinct of Burnside's taking a stand. And they're like, Burnside? What? What's going on? So one of the robots gets up behind Barbara. It's about to kill her. And then all of a sudden it's stopped by ink. And it turns out that she is now on the side of the angel. She tells Barbara like, yeah, all this was for my daughter. I hope you understand that. And she's like, no, yeah, I get it. That makes sense. So now that she's part of it, she's like, cool, help my people out. And as they are fighting through the stuff, we cut back up to the moon base again. And Brother Eye's like, look at that. Your mom has given up on you. She's not obeying my orders anymore, so she's willing to let you die. That's how that is. And Deanna's like, I don't think that's what's happening there. And Brother Eye's like, all right, well, regardless, I'm not going to process you until I have her in my clutches, because I want to make her watch you be processed. That's the reason you're going to be staying alive until we get up to the moon base. So we see a bunch of ships are coming in. They're trying to evacuate sick and elderly people. Matt is there talking to Nora, just like, oh my God, Gotham was the last safe haven. We're all screwed. Nothing can save us. And then a doctor comes up with a little like iPad showing Batman fighting and just be like, check this out. Batman's fighting. He's like, okay, yeah, Batman could save us. So outside the city, we see that Wave 2 is being prepared. It consists of the Justice League members, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, Superman, all of them cyborgized. So back in the city, Batman and Micron just continue their fighting. We see a Joker goon comes up behind Tim and it's just like, isn't this great? Oh, everything's burning. It's all falling apart. This is fantastic. And then she gets jammed through the back of the head, like through her mouth with a metal tentacle. And all of a sudden, Tim is surrounded. There's Brother Eye drones all around. They're bringing around. And Tim's narration's like, there comes a point in every fight where you realize you've lost. You're surrounded. The odds are insurmountable. You can't possibly do anything about it. But I was taught otherwise by a great man named Bruce. So I can't tell if he does this because the art looks like he does it. It looks like he uses some sort of blast or something to get all of the drones off of him. However, as soon as that happens, Barbara's there in a new upgraded bat plane and says, get in. So I think it was her, but the art says otherwise. So she hops in and Tim's like, all right, we need something we can fight them with. I need some more firepower. Where are we hiding at? And so we go way off the grid, probably to Wayne Manor. We go down into the Batcave and Tim remarks like, this place looks different. It's like, yeah, it's been 30 years. We've made some upgrades. We've done whatever we can. But we see each of the little cylinders in the cave that holds costumes has like Nightwings, has Barbara's, like everyone's is in there, except for the empty tube that clearly has the Batman Beyond suit. And he's like, okay, well, I guess that's for me. But because it's not in there, do we have like a 2.0 version? And Barbara's like, bro, you're wearing the 5.0 version. Like, you have the most advanced tech that we have there. But don't worry, we've got something else in the vault that we can break out here for some quote-unquote firepower. And so Tim goes over to the vault. He opens it up. And inside is the Jim Gordon rookie suit, the bunny robot suit that is currently being used in main continuity. And Barbara says, yeah, well, we can't have 2.0, so 1.0 is going to have to do. I don't know why this is in the vault. This seems like the sort of thing that is absolutely going to be busted as soon as like the end of the current Scott Snyder run hits, because I feel like something's going to happen to that suit that's going to make it impossible to be here in the future, but whatever. No, the issue itself, I think, plays fine, but it is just one big fight scene. It is just, oh, there's all out chaos and fighting and big explosions and stuff like that. I think every panel has some sort of an explosion going on in it. And they do a cool little art thing where in between the panels, there'll be a tiny little like vertical panel that's barely even there that is washed out color, but it shows just something going on elsewhere on the battlefield. People reacting to like a robot near them or an explosion or something like that. And it does give a larger sense of this battle going on and how it's not just limited to whatever it is Tim. This is impossible. Tim and Micron and Barbara are doing. So I appreciate that, but it is kind of hard to say that this really accomplishes anything because it is just one big fight scene. So I'm going to say this is a 7. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly okay. It's just not fantastic by any means. Lobo number 10, written by Cullen, Bunn, and Frank Barbiere, art by Robson, Rocha. So last issue, I believe, to some extent, we had Lobo getting hired by Sinestro. This is all kind of part of a meta event called Sinestro Rising, but it's an event in the same way that like every other DC comic is an event where it's just a couple books cross over with each other and characters are shared. So we pick up on the Indigo Tribe planet Nock, and Lobo's just given a rundown saying like, oh yeah, Abensur and one of his buddies named Nostromo, they showed up, they made the Indigo Tribe, and they were able to imbue it with compassion. However, they used a bunch of serial killers, and like this was their quote-unquote penance for that. They had to learn compassion. However, it gets rid of like all other emotions, and they're basically just slaves to their compassion. And Sinestro really, really hates them, which I think stems back to early in Jeff Johns' run, early in the New 52, during Jeff Johns' run. So we see Indigo 1, the leader. She's attacked by another Indigo Tribe member who seemingly has lost a hand, and he's going nuts and crazy over it. So he doesn't have his ring anymore, I guess is the point. And she's just like, what's going on? What's happening? And he's just yelling, screaming, doing whatever, chasing down Indigo 1. And as it looks like she's about to be killed, Lobo comes in and straight up like rips his head off and cuts him in half. And he's just like, look, Sinestro wants the Indigo Tribe members dead. If I had just left this alone, that would have happened. However, then I wouldn't get my cut. So we then see him washing off his blades, doing whatever, turning over to Indigo 1. Indigo 1 just says knock all the time. That's her thing. And Lobo's like, look, I know what that means, but trust me, I'm the opposite. So clearly she thought he was a savior, but not in this case. He opens up a bag and dumps out the contents, which is a significant number of hands that have things like red lantern rings on them, Indigo Tribe, blue lantern rings. And he's like, yep, that's what I'm doing today, and you're next. So she starts trying to fight back. She apparently is able to control a whole bunch of rings, and they start flying and buzzing around Lobo. He's like, well, this is just annoying. But one of them gets onto his finger, and he's like, oh, God, I can feel my emotions. They're burning away. I'm trying to, it's like, I'm feeling compassionate. And so he bites off his own finger and just spits it out. And Indigo 1's like, what? Are you, seriously? And he's like, yeah, what? You didn't expect that, but I'm not going to be one of your slaves. So he kicks her down and he's like, look, I can afford to lose a finger or two. How about you? And she uses her Indigo abilities to teleport out, and Lobo's unable to land a hand on her. And she's like, all right, well, I wasn't expecting that. Fair enough. But she's not going to get far. I'll be able to track her down sooner rather than later. So we cut back over to a meeting of Sinestro and Lobo's boss, who works for whatever that... I can't remember what the name of it is anymore. But regardless, he comes in with a bag of hands just being like, yep, check it out, all this stuff, Sinestro. And he's like, all right, you'll be paid top dollar. By the way, did you get Indigo 1? And he's like, nah, she slipped through the cracks. Don't worry, I'm going to be able to get her. And Becca, the new god, is standing off to the side being like, sounds like a coward. And Sinestro just shoots her a look, and she's like, I'm going to go do literally anything else. So Sinestro's like, look, yeah, they've eluded me too. I hate the Indigo tribe with a passion. It's a whole thing. And the boss is there like, okay, so if there's such a problem, maybe we need to up our prices. And Sinestro's like, it is not like, get over zealous here. Like, if you guys aren't going to do it for a reasonable price here, I'm just going to do it myself. My inability to catch them is not out of incompetence. It's out of, I'm doing other stuff right now. So we see that his attention is not only on the Indigo Lanterns, it's on all the different ones. So he does a walk and talk with Lobo, just being like, all right, look, regardless, you will continue to get money as long as you keep on doing that. You're an excellent soldier. And Lobo's like, shove it. I don't care about like being praised or whatever. I do it because it's a job. Who's next? And Sinestro's like, fair enough. Here's the list of all the other places and the last lanterns we've seen there. So he hands it off, and Lobo's talking. Again, the boss is just a hologram, but he's talking to the hologram of the boss, being like, all right, so that went well. We're still on good graces with him. And the boss is like, I mean, I guess. He seems very fickle. So we cut over to the next job, which is Red Lanterns. We run into Bleeze and Rancor, who are the more or less main Red Lanterns for most of the run of the Red Lanterns book. And Lobo's firing crazy shots out of his ship. He's trying to kill him, do whatever he can. He's just like, yeah, well, I can keep up the chase. They're not that fast. So they're trying to flee. And Rancor's like, screw that. I'm going to take this guy out. Please, you do what you're going to do. And so he turns around and he's ready to fight the ship. And he's like, oh, face me. And Lobo fires off some more weapons. Rancor's able to dodge through them. And by the way, Rancor's a human. For anyone who doesn't know the book, he's just a guy who got imbued with Red Lantern powers. So as he comes up on the ship, Lobo hits the eject button and like gets up on top of the ship and jumps his way out to stab Rancor through the chest. Rancor seems to shrug this off. He's like, get off me, I don't need you. And he makes a construct of like a big red scythe, starts swinging at Lobo. He's like, oh, I can sense your rage inside. You should make an excellent Red Lantern. Lobo's like, I know how to control my rage, though. I'm able to direct it, and I don't need a trinket to be able to make it work for me. And so we see that he is continuing to fight against Rancor. He presses a button on his gauntlet, and we see his ship has somehow made it behind Rancor and pulls a goblin glider on him and just impales him to the point where his ribs are on the outside. He is not okay. And so Rancor, this main character from a book from before this, is dead. And he takes the ring off of Rancor's finger and goes on his way. And he's like, yeah, these rings, they aren't just a power, they're also a weakness. If you take away the ring from the lantern, they're easily killed. So that kind of weak spot is usually reserved for video games, but here it is here. And Bleeze sees that Rancor is dead. She's upset about it. She decides to go back to some sort of citadel or something like that. And as she moves through a whole bunch of corpses that are being around, she talks to someone who's like, hey, what happened out there, Bleeze? And Bleeze is like, my lord, Rancor's dead. It was a Zarnian. We lost him. We don't know where he's at. And we see the person on the other side say, oh, this will not stand. The Red Lanterns won't yield. It's Atrocitus. It's the old leader of the Red Lanterns, and he says, we've waited in the shadows as the Rage Mother has perfected our new rings. The Red Lantern Corps will have their revenge. We will take the Hunter's head. And we see this strange-ass looking being there, who I assume is the Rage Mother, is spitting out a new power battery and imbuing it with energy. And that's the issue. All right, so first things first, this wasn't collected in a Lobo book. This was collected as part of the Sinestro book, so I have it as single issue just because it's easier for me to deal with, but just know if you're looking for it in trades, you got to go to the Sinestro book. Anyway, I like the posit of the book of Lobo going around and hunting down lanterns on Sinestro's behalf. That's really cool to me. I really do like that. Indigo Tribe, it seems like they handled pretty decently. I don't think I remember anything in continuity that like explicitly is saying that this shouldn't be a thing that happens, but it's fine. It works out. I'm cool with the fighting scene we had there and the teleportation. The part that gets me is the Red Lantern bit, because this is no fault to Cullen, Bunn, or Frank Barbiere, but the Red Lantern book left off in such a weird place where it began as a book about Atrocitus turning his Red Lanterns into a, not force for good, but a positive force in the universe, something that could fight against evil to some extent. And then Guy Gardner got involved, became head of the Corps. They continued down that path, but then there was a schism between Guy Gardner and Atrocitus, which basically meant that the book ended with all of the B-tier characters of Rancor and Bleeze and all that were just gone, and we only focused on Guy Gardner as a Red Lantern, and then it just ended. We didn't know what it, but like Bleeze and Rancor were on the opposite side of Atrocitus. So I guess what I'm hoping for is that we get an explanation. We say, why is Bleeze back with Atrocitus at this point? Why, like, what happened in between the end of the Red Lantern's book to get us here? It's not that I'm really that big on the continuity of things, but I want anything. I want any sort of thing, because to be honest with you, the only other time that we've seen a Red Lantern in the in-between there is during Convergence. They had a few cuts to a few Red Lanterns in like a ship, and those Red Lanterns they showed were supposed to be dead. Like there was zero explanation as to what was happening there. So I guess I more or less just want them to say, hey, at least we've read the book. We read Red Lanterns. We know how it ended up, and here's how we got to here. That's the bare minimum, I think, for writing in a shared universe. Anyway, ratings-wise, I appreciate the art. The writing's all right, and like I said, I like the concept of the story quite a bit. So I think I'm going to give this one a 7.5. It manages to squeak up above a 7 that I think I normally would give something like Lobo, because I like the Sinestro book actually quite a bit of what it's doing with it. So this kind of gets a boost just by context of that. Bat-Mite number 4, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Corin, Howell. So last issue was primarily focused on Robin, and we were fighting against the villain in Gridlock. We got a Booster Gold tease at the end, and we pick right up on that. First things first, though, we meet up with our two human characters, Weed and Reagan, who Reagan's just super pissed off that Bat-Mite's been living for them for like months, apparently. And he's been causing all of these issues. He's been going crazy. And as they enter into the apartment, Bat-Mite apparently tried cooking and has caused numerous fires and whatnot in their kitchen. And so he's got a pot full of water. He's trying to put it out. And he's talking about like, oh, the fiendish fire is finished. And he's, using all these extra superhero terminology. However, Reagan notices that the thing that's on fire is actually her family photo album. And she's like, why the hell was this even in the kitchen? He's like, oh, well, I wanted to know more about you. So I just looked through your photo album and I guess I got distracted. Who would have thought they would catch on fire? And so Reagan just explodes at Bat-Mite, just storms out in tears, just like, you're an idiot, you're responsible for this disaster, it's all you. And even Weed turns around just being like, you really messed up, dude. This is really bad this time. So at that point, there's a knock at the door, and in comes Skeets, who, for anyone who somehow doesn't know Skeets from Booster Gold, it's a little robot, and he's like, hello, I'm a security droid, you can call me Skeets, I'm looking for Bat-Mite, and Bat-Mite's just like, what if you're an Executron? And I don't think that's even a thing, but regardless, he blips out, he's like, nope, not dealing with this, and Skeets is like, I don't even know what that is. And in steps Booster Gold, to which Weed is like, oh, you're the cereal guy. I've seen you on the cereal boxes. He's like, yeah, I'm also a superhero, but whatever. Yeah, that too. So at that point, Bat-Mite comes in, and he thinks that Booster Gold is a villain or is trying to kill him or whatever. So he grabs Booster and teleports out over top of the city. And he's like, haha, I've got you now. I'll just let you drop until you fear me so much that you confess as to who you are. And so he lets go and Booster just starts flying. He's like, yeah, that's part of my power set, man. I'm Booster Gold. Do you not know that? And Bat-Mite pretends that he's like, oh, I've deduced that you're not a villain, or at least not a Sentry Silent. And Booster's like, what the hell is a Sentry Silent? He goes off on this whole thing about like fifth dimensional politics or whatever, and just like, yeah, okay, no idea. Anyway, we're looking for Gridlock. Do you know who that is? And he's like, yeah, no, we dealt with him last issue. He disappeared. And it's just like, okay, well, he is clearly doing something regarding messing with time. And as Booster Gold, that's kind of my thing, so we're just hunting him down. And Booster tells him how he's like the protector of time or whatever, and Bat-Mite's like, I never heard of you. However, Bat-Mite basically says, well, whatever your problem with Gridlock is, it doesn't matter, because your actual problem is that you are completely forgettable. And Booster's like, come on, man, what are we doing? And so he says, like, yeah, I'm going to change up everything about you. And he just, look, from a meta perspective, Dan Jurgens, who's writing this book, made Booster Gold. As far as I'm aware, I'm like 99% sure of that. This just feels like him poking fun at his own creation, and he's just like, what kind of name is Booster Gold anyway? What were you born in Fort Knox with some radioactive gold bars? Like, what is this all about here? So Bat-Mite just says, all right, time for a makeover, and he uses his powers to make him more Batman-esque, to which he's now dressed in black. He's got a skull on his chest and spikes on his shoulder pads, and they cycle through a few names until they end up with Black Gold, to which point Booster's like, oh dear God, Skeets, tell me you're not recording this. And Skeets like, I record everything. Yeah, we're posting all this. So Booster starts getting angry at Bat-Mite. He's like, yeah, that's right. Like, you gotta really seethe. You never smile. And he's like, no, that's not going to be a problem. Not this time, at least. And then Booster mentions again, like, look, all I wanted to do was find out about Gridlock. And Batman's like, oh, okay. And he snaps his fingers, and they're in Gridlock's lair. And the whole point that they're making during this issue for Gridlock, and it was kind of tapped upon last issue, is that he is the metaphorical stand-in for people who don't want comics to change or be different. They want the same stuff they grew up with as a kid. Because as we get into his lair, we literally see that he has a whole bunch of stuff, like classic cars, some like old movie memorabilia and whatnot. But he also has a huge comic book collection that is in mint condition, to which Skeet points out, oh, it is in mint condition because he's used whatever time technology or whatever to basically freeze it the day after it releases, even if it's dozens of years old. So Gridlock catches them and he starts throwing punches. Booster says, hey, it's no big deal. I've got my force field. I can't be touched, so he can't paralyze me because that's his whole power or whatever. And they just have like a debate on like, oh, you can't be messing with time, Gridlock, it's not right. And he's like, screw you, it's literally the best time as when I was 10 years old. So Gridlock goes to grab him, and Booster's like, I can't be touched. And then he grabs him and he touches him. And it turns out during Bat-Mite's makeover, he got rid of the force field. So Skeets comes in. He's doing quick work of Gridlock. He's got a laser beam or something like that to take him out. And Bat-Mite's like, yep, I'll help too. And he conjures up a Bat-Zooka, which then blows up the classic cars that Gridlock owns. And he's like, what did you do to my stuff? Why would you do that? And Skeets comes over to Bat-Mite and he's like, hey man, here's the thing. I've been able to study Batman's like techniques and stuff like that, which obviously you taught him, right, Bat-Mite? And Bat-Mite's like, yeah. He's like, right. So, all of the Batman thing says that you need to be able to give Booster his force field back in order to stop the cars from exploding. Because right now they're on fire, but they haven't exploded yet. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's something Batman and also by extension me would do. And so he gives Booster his old costume back, but it seems like it might be a second too late as all the cars explode. But wouldn't you know it, of course they got there in time. So a lot of the collection has also been saved, and they make the point of saying, like, what do we do with this stuff? And they just say, we'll figure something out. Like, they don't actually ever say what they do with it. So later on, Bat-Mite's talking to Skeets. Booster's nowhere to be seen. And he's like, hey, could you protect me? I really messed up with my roommates before, and I could use a security droid. And then Booster comes out of a time portal. He's like, look, you caused a lot of problems, but you did to some extent save me there. So here you go. And he hands off a box to Booster, and he's like, yeah, I'm a time traveler. I can make small jumps like an hour or two into the past. No big deal. So Booster goes off, and Bat-Mite goes back to his apartment, and Reagan's still looking all sad. So Bat-Mite shows up, and she's like, get out of here, I don't want to see you. And she's like, oh, what about this? And inside the box is the photo album taken just minutes before the fire happened. And so she's so happy about it. She hugs Bat-Mite, gives him a big thanks. And then on the TV, we tease that the Inferior Five are coming into town. And Bat-Mite's like, oh, this is my calling. This is who I can help next. So, yeah, that's the issue. It's exactly what the other Bat-Mite issues have been. Like, we had the first two issues were more or less a self-contained story, and now we're doing this Gridlock thing. Gridlock, of course, escaped last time, so I'm sure he's going to keep on showing up. But my biggest thing is that it just... I don't know. It feels like it's coming in with this intention of, at least with Gridlock, of saying something about, you know, times change, things get different. That doesn't mean they're inherently bad. And that's fine. That's a fine message to have in comics. I'm not positing that that is a bad one to do. However, the fact that they do it so ham-fistedly, the fact that, like, it's one thing if you have a character who is into the old stuff and is trying to get, like, you know, he has his paralyzing ability that works for that of like keeping people still, so be it, I'm fine with that. But to have the character literally come out and say everything was better when I was 10 years old, it's like, okay, do we have to though? Like, is that something that's actually necessary here? We can understand subtext, maybe not in a Bat-Mite book, but we're capable of it generally. So yeah, I don't hate the underlying message, I just hate the way it's executed, I guess is the way I'm saying it here. So, hate's even a strong word. I just dislike it. So, I'm going to say this one is probably a 6 for me. It's okay. It's just a quick, self-contained story. Art's nothing great, in my opinion, but maybe you get something more out of it than I do. And frankly, it's like Bat-Mite and Booster Gold. Could you think of a less selling title than that? Omega Men number 4, written by Tom King, art by Toby Cypres. This is a guest artist coming onto this issue. So last issue, we had the big reveal that Callista, who was abducted last issue, she was a princess and was taken in by the Omega Men. Turns out she's the leader of the Omega Men, and she has some plan to convince Kyle that he should join or at least listen to what she has to say. This issue is probably most of that plan. So we see Kyle is just playing over and over again in his head the fact that he was forced to leave and not be able to save the people that were down on that planet back in issue 2. And Callista's asking, like, are you still awake? And he's like, yeah, I'm awake. I've you know, they tell us when it's day, when it's night, when we should sleep, when we should eat. And like, I just don't feel like sleeping right now. And she's like, all right, well, you know, we should both sleep. We deserve a little bit of peace from what we've been through. And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. So it's hard to break this down like panel to panel, page to page, because it is very much just the conversation between these two and them talking about their own hopes, their fears, their lives, and like how they've been forced to make these certain choices and whatnot. So talking about the most general sense of things as they're sitting here is that Kyle basically goes into the history of like, yeah, no, I'm a lantern. And as a lantern, I am not allowed to be afraid of things. Like, that's kind of a prerequisite, is that we can conquer our fears. And Khaleesi's like, oh, I mean, I thought that was just a fairy tale. And she's like, you're a princess, isn't that just a fairy tale? And he's like, oh no, I am not a fairy tale princess. So Kyle gives a breakdown, and he's like, actually, you know what's funny? I am the one lantern, not just in the Green Lanterns, but out of all the corps of everything, that didn't have to prove himself as capable of doing the thing. Like, every other Lantern Corps, the ring searches out for the user based off their capability for whatever it is. But me, it was because of the Hal Jordan Parallax stuff. Like, I was given the ring because they needed to find somebody, anybody, and I happened to be the one who was there. And like, I was terrified. I was absolutely scared as hell. And like, it honestly, it really, all that power, all that stuff like that, it was just a chance. On one side of the coin, I could have grown up to just be like, you know, an okay cartoonist, someone who was mildly successful, wife, kids, and one day I die and they remember their father as an artist. But it didn't end up that way. I ended up as the White Lantern at a certain point. I was, you know, the other side of the coin where everything was crazy. And like, I've seen all this other stuff. And Callista catches on to the point of the wife and the kid and just be like, wife, did you have a girlfriend? Like, what happened to her? And he's like, she died. She died because, like, specifically, I couldn't save her. I was incapable of doing so. And we see that what ended up happening before the series, what led into here, is that Kyle was like, look, I chose this job. I ever since I lost her and, like, all the stuff that happened, I have to save everyone. I have to do my thing. And in the Green Lantern mythos, we aren't allowed to go into the Vega system. Like, that's just not something we're allowed to do. But I heard that there were people dying in the Vega system. I heard about these Omega Men that were terrorists and were causing all these problems. So I went in and I talked to the Citadel, and I made a deal to go in and be able to talk to the Omega Men. But the deal was I had to leave my ring behind. But I was so focused on having to save people that, yeah, I figured it was worth it. So I went in with the intention of being able to start a negotiation to end this war together. And the Omega Men swore on their god, on this thing they hold so dear, that they would let me go back. Whoops. And yeah, so that's how I ended up here. And that's why, like, all those people died, because I don't have the ability to stop it anymore. And I just had to watch and as they died and we just left. And it's something that's haunting me because, again, I have to save everyone. That's my thing. And I'm so scared that I can't do that now. And so as his side of the conversation dies, we zoom out, we see that they're being watched on security camera by Primus and Tigor is just like, our fearless leader's doing a good job of getting to open up. Primus, you sure you want to watch what's going to happen next? Because I think we all know what's going to happen. And Primus is like, it's fine. It's all good. Callista knows that this is nothing. It's just part of the plan. It's whatever else. And so then Callista gives her side of things and says, yeah, no, as a princess, I'm not supposed to be scared either, but I am scared. And she gives the history of her people, the Brahmin people, which, oh boy, are there some parallels too for modern day stuff. So turns out the Brahmins, they are now a warlike people. They do have all like control over the natives of this planet that they live on. And she says it wasn't always that way. It used to be that we were just a normal people, but we had a religion where we believed that the Alpha, this godlike entity to most other people, was not an actual god. He was just a king. He was just someone who was very, very good of being a person, but he was also the first in the lineage of our royalty. And the people didn't like that, and they told us to leave. And so they shoved us off into this planet of euphorics and said, here you go. Here's a planet all to yourself. You just live there. And when we were there was already a native people there, and the native people didn't like us, so they started trying to shove us off. But we were so fed up at that point that we said, no, screw that, we're staying, and we started just slaughtering the native people until we could take control of them. So that's already got a lot of connotations to it. Very modern day politics stuff. But regardless, at one point she says, all right, well, my father, he wanted to take me around to the other 5 planets of the Vega system and tell me why Euphorix was special, why we did what we did was right compared to the other planets there. And so we went to Egyptu, where the natives were maintained through slavery and they were turned into servants. And he says this will never work because there will always be an uprising. And we see Primus being the voice of the uprising and having all the non-violent leaders and whatnot. But the father sees potential in him. And then we cut to Changelin, where they are essentially a very religious planet, and they're essentially just bribed and paid off to not rebel against the main citadel and the empire and all that. However, the father points out that there's nothing stopping them from being bribed to do the other thing, to come in and say, oh, actually, rebel. So we then cut over to Karna, where the locals, which are Tigor's people, are constantly warring all the time. It's nonstop war, death on both sides, just consistently. And the father says, this is what we would be without what we do. This is if you just completely go lawlessness, and it's just, here it is, 100%. We then go to the planet of Hinks, which is a market planet where people from all over the Vega system come to sell their stuff, but it is, an absolute like chaotic marketplace. And he's like, look, all of this chaos, this is what happens if you let the natives free. This is what they bring. This is the kind of problems that they bring in. And then there's Vorl, and Vorl's a special planet because as soon as they saw the Citadel coming in, as soon as they saw showing up, they threw up a force field and they never let it down. No one has come or gone to the planet of Vorl in the entire time the Citadel's been a thing. And the father says that's the easy solution, is just to retreat. So yeah, the Brahmins don't retreat. They rule through power. They rule through sheer strength. And that's why the princess is so, not malicious, but so incredibly violent towards the native people and all that. And he's like, you're just a child when you learn how to kill. And she points out, she's like, I hate the Omega Men for what they did, for how they took us, but they're not wrong about the Citadel. Like, the Citadel has done horrible, awful things, and the things that we have to do on each planet just to be able to survive them, like, it's awful what we do. And Kyle comes over, sits on the bed with her, and they start just like holding each other. They have a genuine, quote unquote, genuine emotional moment, just sharing that. And she's like, look, I'm trapped. If I ever escape here, if I manage to actually get out, I'm just going back to that old life. I'm just going back to being stuck in that cage once again. And Kyle consoles her, just being like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And she's like, no, it's not. It's not okay. And she apologizes. She's like, look, I want to ask you something. And I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. And he's like, I think I know where this is going. She's like, look, we are both here. We both can't sleep, and we both need a distraction. Maybe we can distract each other, Maybe we can just, if you want to save somebody so bad, why don't you save me for just tonight at the very least? And Kyle's just like, okay. So we see them starting to share a kiss. It zooms back out to the surveillance footage, and Tigor's like, all right, there you go. It's all set up. We primed the bomb. Now we just got to wait for it to go boom. And as the kissing gets a bit more passionate, Primus is like, all right, we can turn off the camera now. I don't think we need to see what happens next. So that's the issue. Oh boy. Maybe I'm reading too deep into it, but like, I got to that bit where Kalista gives the history of the Brahmin people, and like, geez, man, it's relevant. It's really, really relevant. Like, good on Tom King. Because I've read this before. I read this, and I wasn't always very aware of situations over in certain aspects of the world. But I read this probably back in 2017, 18, and I didn't catch on to that. I was like, oh, okay, that's a good backstory for those people. So be it. But now I read it with the modern day context of knowing what I know about world politics, and I'm like, oh God, oh geez. So good on Tom King for having that. Beyond that, I do nothing against Toby Cypres. His art is very good. It would be great in a lot of books, but I am so mentally set on Barnaby Bajenda's art style on this that having this more, I'll say, loosey-goosey, more sketchy style to it does feel just a little bit weird. It feels a little bit out of place. It's not bad, but I think that I think it's intentional that this issue, where it's all just backstory and flashback and a lot more esoteric drawings rather than actual plot-based, here's what's happening, was the guest artist. And I appreciate that, but it does still give a little shock to the system as you're reading it. So overall, great issue. I think this one's an 8. It's not the best issue of Omega Men that we've had so far, and I know it's not the best in the series overall, but it is still very good, and I like the way that it breaks down these character motivations, where you then understand how they're going to use that for the rest of the series and use that for their own goals. So yeah, solid 8, definitely check it out. And that's it. That is all the comics put out by DC Comics this September 2nd, 2015. And I guess I should have said this up front, but I kind of forgot because of how I'm filming this. Like I said, it's much earlier than usual. Happy Labor Day. That was yesterday. Hope it was a good one. I mean, most of my audience, I believe, is based in America, and obviously America, not being a capitalist hellscape that it is, very much values labor, and we definitely don't just limit it to one little tiny head nod of a holiday saying, yeah, that's okay. You get back to work tomorrow, though. I make fun, but that's literally the position I'm in. I just took off an extra few days because, once again, moving. So, let's talk about next week. Next week is actually a little bit of a weird one. It's 12 comics, pretty normal lineup there, but there is one exception to that. So in alphabetical order, books coming out are Action Comics, All-Star Section 8, Batman, Batman/Superman, Catwoman, Earth 2 Society, Gotham Academy, Justice League United, New Suicide Squad, Red Hood Arsenal, and Starfire. Now that's 11 of the books, but there is a 12th, and the 12th book is a one-shot of Harley Quinn Road Trip Special. A couple months ago, I did the Harley Quinn Comic-Con special that I understand the viewpoint of like, okay, you know, it's Comic-Con season. Sure, we want to write something for that. And it's something we could sell at the cons. No problem. Great. What's the road trip special? I have no idea what this is. And to be clear, there are other specials that are also coming up later on. I think there's a Valentine's Day special. Did we already do the holiday special? Maybe we did. But regardless, you know, holidays, that makes sense. I don't know what the road trip special is supposed to be. I guess we'll find out. But of course, it's written by Amanda Conner and Jim Palmiotti because they just write every single thing that Harley Quinn's involved with right up until, I don't know, like 2017. They had so long on that book. Anyway, that is all the books coming out next week. If you have any opinions on the books that I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up in the comments section down beneath this YouTube video if that's how you're watching it. But if you are listening to the audio version, there's a bunch of places you can make your voice heard. We have a subreddit, we have a Patreon, we have a Discord, we have a bunch of stuff like that. Also, I don't know if this really adds anything, but we, on this channel, on the Comics from the Multiverse channel, where I post these videos, we recently hit 1,000 subscribers, which means we are now able to do memberships. What do you get with a membership? Well, there are going to be certain members-only videos that relate to the Comics from the Multiverse show. That is going to be voted on via Patreon, but I'm sure that there's some way you can do it on the membership as well. So that's available. From me, you get nothing. You have absolutely, I offer you nothing for a membership. And the reason for that is I don't see that money. So why should I put in the extra effort? I knew what this show was when I began it, and goddamn, I'm not going to change just because money's involved. Once again, capitalist hellscape. Anyway, don't want to get too deep into it. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.